looks like you're interested.
Yes, I use my phone.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to our second and final panel of the day. If you joined us previously, I will look and sound familiar, but for those who weren't with us, I'm Courtney Cochran, Manager of Youth Leadership at National Wildlife Federation and our Education and Engagement Department, and I will be moderating this panel. Thank you all so much for showing up or returning. This panel will focus on careers in climate resilience, a field that's not just about responding to climate change, but about preparing communities to thrive in the face of it. The professionals joining us for this panel have a range of experiences, including community organizing, municipal planning and policy, advocacy, science, finance, and more. Each panelist will share a bit of their personal and professional journeys, the work they do today, and their advice for young environmental leaders seeking to make a difference in this area of work in their own career paths. As usual, we'll have each panelist discuss a bit about their career paths and advice and have a question and answer session at the end. However, our first panelist, Chris Castro, does have to hop off early, so please send in any questions you may have for Chris while he is presenting, and we'll try to ask a few before he has to jump off. So first up is Chris. Chris Castro is the founding director and EVP, Chief Sustainability Officer at Climate First Bank, with a distinguished career advancing sustainability, clean energy, and climate action. He previously served as a presidential appointee for the Biden-Harris administration, managing a $16 billion portfolio of grants and technical assistance programs at the U.S. Department of Energy. He also spent nearly a decade with the city of Orlando as senior advisor to Mayor Buddy Dyer and director of sustainability and resilience, developing policies and programs to advance the city's sustainability and climate goals through the Green Works Orlando initiative. Beyond public service, Chris Castro is also known for his eco-entrepreneurial efforts. He co-founded Ideas for Us, a global UN-accredited nonprofit advancing community-led sustainability projects, and started Citizen Energy, a clean energy consulting firm specializing in commercial and multifamily buildings. Chris also co-created Fleet Farming, an urban farming social enterprise transforming underutilized land into edible landscapes throughout Central Florida. Chris holds a BS in Environmental Studies and Policy, Energy, and Sustainability from the University of Central Florida. Chris, welcome so much. Could you tell us a bit more about your own career path and your advice to our folks who might be interested in pursuing a similar career path? And while you get started, I will go ahead and share your slides. All right, those should be visible now, and they're on the first slide. And we cannot hear you, Chris.
Sorry, Chris, I muted your other connection on the phone, so you should be able to unmute there.
Still can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, weird. I'm so sorry about that. Technical difficulties, we're all about them this afternoon, it seems like. But thank you all for joining. Thank you, Courtney and David, and for the invitation, and for everybody who's here on the line. I'm really honored to be here and share my story, hopefully share some insights that I've learned along the way in my climate career that could be useful to you all. And I'm calling this this presentation a climate career from campus to capital, and you'll hear a little bit more about why. Next slide. So you heard a little bit about my bio, but as a brief background, over the last 18 years, I've really devoted my life to creating organizations and companies, advancing policies and programs, and ultimately trying to create innovative solutions that help people and nature thrive in harmony with one another. Kind of the very idea of sustainability and a sustainable future. Throughout this presentation, you'll hear about this journey. It includes campus and community organizing, as mentioned, eco-entrepreneurship, public policy, and now in my role in banking and finance, where I help to finance solutions to sustainability at scale. And I think one of my strengths in this journey, when I was reflecting on this, is it's diverse and it's unconventional. And I think it touches, you'll see a lot of different sectors, and I think that sense of being interdisciplinary has been one of my greatest superpowers in this work. And so I encourage you all as you're going through this journey to try to, get outside your comfort zone, to learn about different things, because this is all about understanding the intersectionality of the work that we're doing. On the slide that you see here, you see my a wide range of events, including attending and speaking at the Vatican Symposium on Sustainable Development, being part of a National Geographic documentary about my role as a sustainability leader, going viral on NBC Nightly News with the fleet farming organization we talked about that grew out of my front lawn, literally, and my engagement with elected officials at the state, local, and federal level. Here you see myself with Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, who I had the privilege of serving for, and I'll dive into that here shortly. Next slide. So my climate journey actually begins at the University of Central Florida in 2006. And at the time, I was an undeclared student. Like many students at that age, you don't really know what you want to do or what you want to focus in on your studies. And I ended up stumbling into a general education course around environmental sociology with Dr. Penelope Cannan. And my life has never been the same. Literally, this course was a complete transformation of my understanding of the world. And going through her course, we learned about the intersections between people and the environment over our history, from our energy and food systems to water, transportation, natural systems. It really helped me understand how people ultimately have been having impact on the planet, and opportunities that we had to move us in a more sustainable direction. And I remember like calling my mom and like letting her know that I think I found my purpose and what I wanted to study. And it was such an important moment, I think, in my career. This was 2006, to give you a timeline. And so right after that, I started to get friends together and talk about taking action on campus, started seeing other students across the country. And this is when Facebook just opens up to the world if you didn't have a .edu. And so I start seeing other universities taking action, and this whole concept of getting your campus to commit to the American College and University President Climate Commitment was a big deal. And so that was my first, foray into campus and community organizing. And we rallied students together, passed a student referendum in the Senate, during the elections of that year. And 86% of the student body said, yes, we want to commit UCF, the second largest university in the country, to carbon neutrality, and ended up taking that to the Board of Trustees and the Board of Governors and getting it fully approved. And I remember late President John Hitt, once that got approved, turning to me and saying, all right, Chris, you have your commitment. Now what? How do we turn this into a reality? And that became the opportunity for me to kind of take it to the next level. At that point, I helped co-found an organization called Ideas for Us. And at this time, it's just a student organization. Its goal is to get students from all disciplines and all different majors to focus on environmental action, not so much environmental advocacy, which I felt we had a lot of in the protesting and civil disobedience. It was more about action and real projects and real solutions and real experiences that can make a difference. And so we started creating the campus garden, the recycling in the dorms. We wrote a grant to install $750,000 worth of solar on campus. That's the photo that you're seeing there, and the list goes on and on, right? Which was incredible. And so just fast forward real quickly. Today, Ideas for Us is 17 years old. It's a United Nations accredited NGO. It has done projects in over 30 countries around the world, and it focuses on helping leaders like yourselves to organize communities, to develop unique and tailored community-based ideas, and to fund local action projects that ultimately can help advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And so, some key takeaways from this experience. One is that campus and community projects, although they're small scale and they could seem like a small scale, they really demonstrate the power of grassroots organizing and the scalability of small pilot projects. I've seen initiatives done at UCF or at NYU scale to other campuses through this network. And I think that that's really powerful. And make sure, we did a lot of documentation, documenting outcomes, building the coalitions of organizations on campuses and in the communities. This is how we drive this stuff forward. So anywho, that's what started me out. Next slide. Funny enough, this presentation is a full circle moment for me. Following my graduation at UCF in 2010, I decided to jump headfirst into scaling this organization. At this point, we have 25 chapters across the United States at different universities, and it's become an organization that we need to foster. And I ended up stumbling on this opportunity to join the Emerging Leaders Council at the National Wildlife Federation. Of course, you all know this well. And sure enough, in 2011, I was selected as a founding member of this new NWF Emerging Leaders Council. It was at the 75th annual conference of NWF, and it was a big deal. And 65 of us came together from across the country. These are youth leaders, very similar to what I was doing at my campus, but all in all walks in the U.S. And we all came to DC for 3 days, and the whole goal was to figure out how do we inspire and kind of invigorate the environmental movement in the years ahead? How do we continue this momentum? And it's just amazing to see how, still today, 14 years later from this ELC, we're engaging on this call. So I think that that's really cool. Next slide. All right, so a couple years after college, I decided to create my first business, and Citizen Energy is the name of this company. It's a boutique clean energy consulting firm. And the whole goal was to help retrofit small and mid-sized buildings. I started to really get insight into the impact that the built environment has on the planet and certainly on the climate. And buildings today are roughly 35% in the United States of overall CO2 emissions. It's about 40% of all of the energy used in the United States. And when you look at cities, when I was in my role at the city, which I'll get to, I realized that buildings were the biggest piece of the carbon footprint of the city. When you added all of the residents, all of the hotels, all of the multifamily, all of the city buildings, and the energy used by them on site and power coming to them, it ended up being over 3/4 of the city's carbon footprint. And in many large cities, that's the case. So Citizen Energy was really focused on how do we create solutions to help demystify what a building can do to ultimately save money, increase its asset value, and ultimately make more profit for that business. And what I learned from this is that as you navigate this journey, it's important that you build a set of skills that includes everything from policy fluency to the basic financing of what happens to the technical aspects of whatever you decide on. Finance, policy, and the technology are going to be woven into whatever you focus on. And these competencies, not only do they open the doors, but they enable professionals to really design these scalable solutions, and so that was something. The other quick caveat is I always underscore the LEED GA certification. If you've ever heard of the LEED Green Associates, it's offered by the U.S. Green Building Council, and it is, in my opinion, one of the best entry-level certifications for people interested in getting involved in sustainability. It's a great course and very attainable. Next slide. So as I'm working on retrofitting buildings, and actually was doing attractions in Orlando like Pirates Dinner Adventure and things like that on iDrive, I ended up receiving an email from the City of Orlando Mayor's office. And the email was basically that there was interest in meeting with me to learn about the work that I had been doing, both with ideas and Citizen Energy. And to make a long story short, I ended up getting appointed by the mayor and took a backseat of my business and essentially went headfirst into the city of Orlando as a public policy professional. And I learned how to leverage local government tools, how to leverage policy, how to leverage procurement, how to leverage partnerships in order to drive climate action. Under my tenure, the city increased its renewable energy share from 0% to over 20%. We ended up subscribing and adding rooftop solar to over 50 facilities, from neighborhood centers to fire stations, you name it, emergency operations centers, and ultimately passed some of the most ambitious climate and green building policies across the Southeast, building benchmarking laws and EV readiness codes. This was like an amazing opportunity. And the big takeaway, I think, from this experience was emphasizing the importance of framing climate solutions in terms of co-benefits. The amount of engagements I had to have across the aisle with a developer or with our commissioner or with the lead of the transit agency, and to speak in their terms about the co-benefits, whether it's cost savings, whether it's public health, whether it's resilience, whether it's job creation. I often didn't use climate in my engagements, in my negotiations. Even the term sustainability sometimes can be seen as kind of a disadvantage. But to my point here, it's really about driving the co-benefits. And little did I know that Orlando's work has become a showcase of how municipal leadership, how local governments can catalyze systematic change and position cities as a national leader in sustainability. And so I think in this moment that we're in right now, I think you're going to see that states and local governments and our community institutions are going to be the critical stakeholders to continue the momentum that we're working towards. Next slide. Got a couple more for you here in my story. Little did I know that I would be, leading down the path towards a dream job. And in 2022, similar to the experience at the city, I was head down doing work, and I got contacted by the White House Office of Presidential Personnel via email. Funny enough, when we all go through cybersecurity training, I phished this email because I thought there's absolutely no way that I'm getting headhunted to go to work at the White House and at the Department of Energy. But sure enough, my CIO ends up calling me saying, "Chris, that is not an email to phish. You should contact that number." And sure enough, long story short, I ended up accepting a presidential appointment to serve as the chief of staff at the U.S. Department of Energy for state and community energy programs. This was a brand new federal programs office. I came in literally as employee one to build, to structure, to build, to basically manage $16 billion worth of grants and technical assistance programs that flowed to all 50 states, territories, thousands of cities, local governments, hundreds of tribal governments. I mean, all focused on historically disadvantaged communities getting access to clean energy and driving this thing forward. And ultimately, I saw firsthand how federal policy and program design can unlock capital at scale, can turn millions into billions and billions into trillions, which is what we need to actually make this transition happen and accelerate these kind of climate solutions that we need at scale. And so I think the underscore here is don't leave out public service. It is often offers the most unparalleled opportunity to learn, to lead, to multiply impact at a scale that you can't do in your own business or in an organization. And, I didn't necessarily think of that when I was going through schooling and even early on getting involved in this. Government was not on my radar until I got contacted by the city. And so I just want to encourage you all to think about that, right? Look at fellowships, look at government roles as strategic career moves. Next slide. That brings me to my transition. Of course, as a presidential appointee, you come and go with administrations, and at the transition of this into this new administration, I left DOE and I started a role at Climate First Bank on February 1st. I currently serve as the Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer here at Climate First. If you haven't heard of us, we are a FDIC insured, B Corp certified, values-based bank. And our whole focus is on trying to use our collective money, individual deposits, business deposits, and use that money to finance change. Our tagline actually is changing finance so that we can finance change. And the thing that I've learned about finance is that it is not the opposite of mission. It is an amplifier to scale the impact that we can have. And as I like to say, our goal is, basically to use this as a force for good, to use bank as a force for good. And so that's, the role that I get to play today, which is super exciting. It involves all types of partnership development with new green banks. I'm creating new products to help us start lending into home energy improvements. So we do solar loans and stuff like that. But now we're going to start helping people upgrade their HVAC to heat pumps and water heaters to heat pump water heaters and all types of other cool efficiency and electrification stuff. And so I get to kind of spend my day figuring out how do we use a bank to actually solve the climate crisis and advance sustainability. Next slide, and this is my last one, and I just wanted to close out with just a few takeaways that I've learned along the way. One is, and you probably heard this a couple of times, one is, I think it's important that when you have an idea, the concept is to think big, start small, and scale fast. Beginning with pilots, measuring outcomes and setting it up for replication is how you start to scale something with meaningful impact. And so don't be afraid to try it. It's part of the process. I know often we have this kind of paralysis to want to engage or initiate, but you'd be surprised what that starts to unlock and create a kind of a snowball effect. Building partnerships and collaborations across sectors, especially across unique sectors, and communicating this impact is essential. In plain language, we need to figure out ways to better articulate what we're doing and find those co-benefits. Remember, I remember now Senator Hickenlooper out of Colorado addressing an audience of sustainability leaders that I was at, and he said, we move at the speed of trust, and trust is built through collaboration. And to me, it was such a very clear just underscore of what it will take to be successful in whatever role that you're in, right? Thirdly, be policy fluent, as I talked about, and be a little finance literate. I didn't study banking and finance. I did not study, underwriting and credit. I focused on environmental science and policy and engineering, right? And it led me down this path to now understanding in each one of the roles that I was playing. At Citizen Energy, I was structuring financing deals for the building owner. At the city, I was enabling PACE financing and self-financing and on-bill financing mechanisms. So I was kind of enabling. And now at DOE, I was helping to give money out through tax credits and rebates and grants. And now at the bank, it's about leveraging that finance. So I think it's really those two skills, policy and finance, are really important. It can make you very effective. And lastly is stay curious. This world is rough. There's a lot going on, and it's going to take passion. It's going to take patience. It's going to take persistence to continue to shape the world that we want for a better place. And so I hope that this was useful, and that my journey inspires you and helps you continue, going down this path as well. And so with that, I think my last slide is just a big good luck ahead, and thank you. And I'm happy to take a couple questions here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. And let's see. I'm gonna dig into the questions and see if we have any. All right, Q&A. All right, so we do have one this is from Luke Heller. As a fellow Floridian, I have witnessed firsthand the opportunity our state has to lead in sustainability, but the political landscape in our state has transformed considerably within the last decade. How can we continue to inspire environmental action in our communities when it seems as though political will is lacking?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. And you're right. I mean, especially in Florida, we're seeing some restrictive policies and real direct attacks to local governments, right? This whole concept of home rule is a big thing for cities, and the ability for us to implement local laws that help to advance our vision of sustainability is a really important aspect. And more, we're seeing that the state legislature is trying to claw back that home rule and give cities the ability to advance that. But because of that, I don't think that we should stop whatsoever. There is an amazing amount of momentum at the local, both city and county level. There is a network of over 60 sustainability directors across the state of Florida in local governments who work together on a monthly basis, who are trying to figure out ways to actually coalesce for either addressing some type of public service commission issue, a docket that needs to be addressed, or legislation, right? I think that the most important thing we need to be focused on is building community. It's getting back to my initial, where I came from, the grassroots of Ideas for Us, and being able to find that organization or those organizations that bring you energy, that bring you joy, but at the same time unlock opportunities. And when I was in Orlando, the power of community was, quite frankly, the most important aspect that allowed us to advance a lot of these big policies, benchmarking laws, EV readiness codes, stuff like that. These are very challenging to get through council. But because of the engagement of our community and the coalition that had been built of organizations, we were able to put pressure, not just on me, but the mayor and the council, to get through these types of policies. And so I would just continue to focus on building community, and starting there, and then continue to identify ways that you can influence your local your local city first and foremost before you're worried about what's happening at the state.
And I think Another question came in. I think you kind of just spoke to it, but in case there's anything else you want to add, Maria asked, how do you build leverage?
Yeah, I think leverage is all about building that partnership and collaboration. I talked about the ecosystem, and what happens is, as an example, and I think it's helpful to kind of maybe talk through an example. One of the things that we were working on in Orlando was this big, what's called an energy integrated resources plan, which is basically how the utility is going to completely pivot over the coming 3 decades to move towards the city's goals of carbon neutrality and 100% renewables, which we passed through city council, right? And so this engagement was kind of controversial. I was sitting in the middle as the mayor's advisor for this plan, and I was supposed to be representing the community. And at the same time, I'm representing the city and OUC. So I'm kind of in this precarious position. And what I realized was that the coalition that I just spoke to, it's called the First 50 Coalition. And it was started out just with NAACP, League of Women Voters, Ideas for Us, Sierra Club, Jobs with Justice, kind of a handful of groups who all came together saying, listen, if we all, although we have different missions, if we all kind of come together and identify 2 or 3 policies or major programs we want to bring forward and work together on, we can do it. And sure enough, these big policies that we passed were because of that. So the leverage really came from building that coalition. And it wasn't just community-based organizations. It was about the business community and working with the chamber, which often was kind of challenging when you're in the middle of city and community, as well as working with academia. And so we worked very closely with both community college and the universities. All of those pieces are part of the leverage. And then, when I was in the seat in Orlando, was able to use those various levers to figure out how to best advance the work. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And we really appreciate your time today and for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you. I
Yeah.
hope that was useful. And again, thank you all for listening. Find me online. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Let's stay connected, and best of luck in you all's journeys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Right.
All right. And now we will move to our next speaker, Oscar Lopez. Oscar Armando Lopez III is a researcher, writer, and artist from the U.S.-Mexico border whose work spans public policy, youth advocacy, climate action, and multilateral diplomacy. He served as the 13th UNA USA Youth Observer to the United Nations, where he represented American youth in global forums and helps advance youth priorities within U.S. processes. And in 2025, he was selected to represent the United States at the Y20 Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. Oscar holds a BA in Government and a BBA in Business Honors from the University of Texas at Austin. His commitment to inclusive policymaking has led him to roles across sectors, including the White House, where he advanced federal climate policy through the Council on Environmental Quality. In response to growing concerns about water scarcity in his hometown, Oscar co-founded the El Rio a Vida Coalition, a collective of scientists, organizers, and community members working to protect the Rio Grande and secure long-term water access for border communities. He is also a member of the Youth Impact Council, launched during NYC Climate Week 2024 to accelerate youth-led global action, and he serves as a youth advisor to the Story Lab. Oscar has served in several boards, including Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation Advisory Board and Laredo Food Policy Council. Oscar, thank you so much for joining us today. I invite you to share a bit about your career path to date and any advice you have for our participants.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you all for joining. It really is a pleasure to be with y'all today. For me, I often talk about my career as one that's been inspired by a want to address the issues I've seen in my community. And I say this because I feel like my career has sort of spanned a number of different policy topics. So some of my first professional experience, started out in college. I was selected for a summer as a Google Public Policy Fellow, where I focused on addressing the growing digital divide in low-income communities and communities of color, mostly because I saw that my own community of Laredo, Texas, which is a community in South Texas on the U.S.-Mexico border, had been deemed one of the worst connected cities in the US. And so for me, I knew from that experience and from early on that I was really interested in pursuing a career in public policy, but felt that I had a number of interests across different policy topics. And the thing that brought me to want to work on climate and environmental policy specifically, again, was seeing sort of an issue in my community that I wanted to know I could play a part in helping to solve. So back in the fall of 2021, there was a Texas Tribune and ProPublica article that revealed that a plant in my hometown community was releasing this chemical called ethylene oxide that was significantly increasing the risk of cancer for those who live nearby. Now, for my community and me, that came as a huge shock. Laredo is a low-income community, mostly made up of individuals that are immigrants or children of immigrants. And we recognize early on this being an example of environmental racism. The idea that oftentimes it is those from low-income communities and communities of color that will experience the vast burden of environmental issues or climate difficulties. I remember going to a EPA listening session that happened a few months after this a report had come out, and hearing the stories of parents who live nearby who said, this is my child, they have cancer, we live nearby. Is there any way that this plant played a part in that? And after hearing story after story, not only was it heartbreaking, but I think it spurred something in my community, a sort of recognition that we weren't going to allow ourselves to be left behind, or we weren't going to allow ourselves to be forgotten, but that we were going to use our collective power as a community to do what we could. For my community, that meant pushing forward lawsuits to help address the emissions and ultimately inspiring the EPA to take on a rule to better regulate the emissions of ethylene oxide. And for me, it meant taking on a role for a semester at the White House at the Council of Environmental Equality, working directly with the individuals under the Biden-Harris administration that were addressing the very same clean air policy topics that I knew my community was facing. Now, my time there for me was exciting, but it was also a little bit scary. I knew that I was applying as somebody that didn't have a technical or science background. I had a public policy background and didn't have a lot of quote unquote experience on paper with climate or with the environment. But I came into the role as somebody that had lived experience and knew what these issues looked like on the ground. And my time there was incredibly formative. I worked with my colleagues on helping to advance the implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I saw firsthand just how much work is put in across different government agencies to ensure that this funding goes to the communities that most need it. I also worked with my colleagues, specifically on the resilience team, on exploring just how important nature-based solutions, right? Recognizing that oftentimes nature provides us with the best solutions to resilience issues, just how much nature-based solutions could play a part in the administration's approach towards climate and environmental resilience. And I think as well, apart from all that, I also got to work a bit and see just how the administration was taking on their focus on environmental justice, specifically through their Justice 40 initiative, where they were committing for 40% of the environmental funding to go to the communities that were oftentimes marginalized and underrepresented, but also through building out digital tools that help to show people just where exactly across the country people who were in marginalized communities were also being affected by climate and environmental difficulties. After I left that role, I knew quickly that I was so eager to continue to be worked on these issues. So I took a class in college on climate and environment and explored a bit more of the science behind the policy that I was working in. But I think I also recognized that as somebody, again, who was just sort of exploring some of the technical aspects of this topic, I needed as much as I could to talk to people around me who knew much more than me, who would be willing to help me better explore these topics. And I think similar to you all, as you all are exploring ideas about your careers or your interests, I would encourage you to not be afraid to ask for those around you for help or for insight. I guarantee you that they're more than eager to help. After graduating from college, I went back home because I knew I wanted to work on some of these issues at a very local level. But I didn't quite know what that could look like yet. So I went to an environmental gathering in my hometown that brought together a number of community members and scientists and artists, all to just talk about the things that we were sort of worried about or thinking about. And it was there that a lot of the conversation centered around a new state report that had showed that because of increasing heat, extreme heat, the Rio Grande, which is our only source of water and the river that flows between us and our neighbors to the south of Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, was in danger of drying up by 2040. Now, for those of us in our community, that was another punch to the gut. The worry that very quickly for our kids, for my generation's kids, they might not even have access to a water source in my community. So initially, right, we were thinking about, well, what could we do? How could we best address this? And within that night, in those 24 hours, we got together as a group, formed what we called the Rio es Vida Coalition, which translates to the River is Life Coalition, put out a press release and announced that we'd be putting all of our minds together to help ensure that we wouldn't be forgotten in national dialogues around climate, and two, that we would use our collective action to spur the city government to take concrete action to advocate for the protection of the river and the guarantee of access to water in our hometown. And within those first few months, thankfully, we had a couple of wins that we were really proud of, but obviously the work for us continues. Now, going on to my role as the 13th UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN, a lot of my work had been very locally focused. But as somebody from the border, from a young age, though I didn't have any prior experiences at the UN or in diplomacy, I recognize for a lot of us on the border, diplomacy is just a way of life. We have to learn how to live with our neighbors across the border because we recognize that we rely on each other for our economies, for our public health. We share a water source and we share the same air. So anything that we do affects the other and vice versa. And so taking into account the importance of international collaboration and global action, I thankfully back in August was appointed as the 13th UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN, which is essentially the young person that's picked every year to represent American youth at the United Nations. For me, that was exciting. And amongst a number of other issues that I was interested in advocating for, things like human rights, democracy, mental health access, I knew that I wanted to use my time in the world to talk about climate. Now, that looked like doing two things. One was talking to world leaders and UN leaders about the need for concrete and focused climate action. But two, it also meant taking a listening tour across the country where I met with young people in their communities to ask them specifically what it was that they wanted to see or what worried them. And I heard a number of young people share with me not just their worries about climate change and the environment and their personal experiences with climate, but also they shared a lot about what they were doing in their own communities to help further action. Things like working with their city council to implement renewable energy projects, doing public outreach campaigns to ensure that they were educating their fellow community members. That to me was really inspiring. And it showed me not just the importance of talking to people in frontline communities and using their insights and their perspectives to create good policy, but it also reminded me of the power of young people. I know many of you might be thinking, I'm still in college or I'm an early professional. How can I have big impact if I feel like I don't really have a lot of influence or authority yet? But I think I'd really implore you all to remember that as young people, not only do we bring fresh and diverse perspectives to many of these issues, we bring an urgency because we recognize that when it comes to these issues, it's our generation that will have to live with the consequences of our actions today. So I encourage you that regardless of your age, whether you feel like you have the quote unquote authority or not, we need your voice in the climate movement. We need your perspectives. And to that point, one of the last things I'll share with you, and something that I've learned throughout my work, is that similar to how I thought that I couldn't work on climate because I didn't have a technical background or wasn't a scientist, I quickly realized that I had my own unique skill set and perspectives that I could bring to the work. And I saw how that my skills were needed in this fight. And similarly, I have no doubt that regardless of what your strengths are, there's a place for you in this movement. If you're an artist, we need artists that could help us in creating the kind of communications that resonates with people who might not know about climate action or who might not be fully convinced about the gravity of the situation. If you're somebody that has a background in agriculture, food policy is huge right now in climate, and we need your perspectives to help us find out how we can ensure that in regions where extreme heat is pushing farmers out of their lands, we could work to create more resilient crops and ensure that climate doesn't displace people further. With that, the last thing I'll leave with you is that I encourage you to be bold in what you believe, in what you plan for, and what you aspire for. I have no doubt that you all are here because you are incredibly talented and incredibly qualified. And I know that if you continue to dream bold and continue to work, I have no doubt that you'll play a part in helping create a better future. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Oscar. Really inspiring story and really great call to action. Just a reminder for folks, we are going to hold the rest of the questions to the end. So if you have some that came to mind while listening to Oscar, feel free to put them in the chat or Q&A, and we will get to those once we have heard from our final speaker. And so with that, we will move last but certainly not least to Arslan Patik, who is the Director of Adaptation and Coastal Resilience for NWF's South Central Region. Her work focuses on advancing science-based climate adaptation and resilience to protect coastal communities and ecosystems throughout the Gulf Coast from the impacts of climate change and associated extreme events. In this role, she distills climate science and highlights innovative nature-based approaches to help local communities and policy experts understand their baseline physical risks and develop equitable solutions in the face of climate-induced threats. She has authored and co-authored several publications on climate change impacts and adaptation, and participates in state-based coastal resilience and hazard mitigation planning across the Gulf. Arslan received her PhD in environmental science and policy from the University of South Florida, where she researched and published on climate impacts and adaptation, decision-making, and small islands using a systems approach. Arslan, thanks so much for joining us. Same question as those before you. Can you share a bit about your career path to date and advice for others?
Thanks, Courtney. Can you all see my screen? Thumbs up would be good. Perfect. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I know you could be anywhere right now, so the fact that you're spending your time learning about careers, it really means that you're already invested in your future, and that's something that's pretty exciting. As Courtney mentioned, I am Arslan Patek, and I am the Director of Adaptation and Coastal Resilience at the National Wildlife Federation. I don't know what you hear when you hear job titles, but for me, the first question is, what do they actually do? So let me just unpack this work for you a little bit. So my work is about helping protect nature to protect people. So that's the idea of nature-based solutions, restoring our coastlines, wetlands, natural features to provide protection for our human communities. It's also about working with communities, helping them plan for floods and climate-induced impacts that they're facing and will continue to face in the future. And then it's also about trying to change the system. So influencing policies, flood plans, and resilience strategies to prepare and adapt for those impacts. Some of the skill sets are what I also call my superpowers that keep me afloat in this work are translating science into action. So using the data and the research and turning them into solutions that people can actually use. Building partnerships, we've heard it loud and clear in our panel today. Resilience, climate adaptation, it's a team sport. So you got to learn how to connect communities and scientists and leaders to that shared messaging. Systems thinking. So it's about these issues are like solving a puzzle, trying to see how floods and climate and equitable solutions fit together, and thinking about it as an entire system really helps in thinking about solutions to these problems. Leading projects and strategies. fun thing about working in a nonprofit, learning to juggle grants and teams and timelines to really move those ideas into action. And then everything you're doing, making sure that equity is front and center. I am a first generation immigrant, also a woman of color. It didn't take me long to understand how climate impacts and opportunities are not felt equally. So that realization has been just as important as my technical training and skill set. And again, a lot of these skill sets, they come from textbooks, but they also come from just trying, failing, learning, listening, what we're doing here, and sort of co-teaching each other from the experiences that we've gathered along the way. As I said, fun thing about working at a nonprofit, no 2 days look the same. Some days I'm at conferences talking about climate adaptation and natural infrastructure with my peers. Other times I am at community workshops, either hosting them or participating in them, but always putting that community piece at the center, listening to people about their experiences and how they experience floods or what solutions they are thinking, and making sure we're uplifting and elevating not just their problems, but the solutions that the communities want and need. Last week, I get to go on a field tour to a regenerative farm with, of course, there were cows and baby goats in there. And of course, in all honesty, a lot of this work is also just sitting in front of the computer, doing research, writing proposals and reports, balancing with my 1-year-old office mate, who is fun for the most part. But the cool part is even that behind the scene work, that just doesn't sit in a folder. It gets published, it gets shared. These are some of the news articles that got the stories that got picked up based on the research and reports that I've drafted. But really, the words I write at my desk, getting a sense that they can reach communities, they can influence decision makers, and they are influencing those conversations about climate resilience. A little bit about my background on how I got here. So I started with a master's in environmental science, earned a PhD in environmental science and policy. My first job after school was at National Wildlife Federation as a specialist. That was a big transition. I moved from academia into the nonprofit world. It also gave me a chance to take all the research skills that I'd built in school and apply them to these very real world problems that impact communities every day. In just a year and a half, I was promoted to a senior specialist, and today I serve as our regional director. Now, it might sound linear when I tell it this way, but the reality was like any career path, it was full of doubts and decisions and unexpected twists. We've heard wonderful career stories today. But I would say all of that is pretty normal. Careers are rarely straight lines. But for me, what really helped me was from the very beginning, coming from both my parents in public service, I knew I wanted to help communities along the way. And through my education, climate change turned out to be that guiding value of helping communities plan and prepare. I still didn't fully know exactly what that would look like, but the more classes I took, the more I explored, sort of the more clearer my career path became. And really by keeping an open mind, learning new skills along the way, following what I'm curious about, that really starts to shape and makes you realize what you're capable of and also what you really care about. Advice for the road ahead. I'll keep it short and sweet. But if I could leave you with 4 key takeaways. Number 1 would be explore widely. So think about internships and volunteering as sort of like your scenic detours. And they often teach you the most. Even being at this panel today, I'm sure it sparks some wonderful ideas for many of you. The next one, your values are your compass. So when you feel lost, these values would help you pick the right direction. For me, it was this understanding and realization of contributing to climate change solutions and helping communities, but also doing it in a way that centers equity. So making sure those who are most impacted have the strongest voice. I also learned the value of representation, that just by being here, it could help widen the path for others to follow. The next one is building mentors and networks. I used to I like to think of them as like travel buddies and road signs, right? Nobody likes to travel alone. And we can solve these big issues ourselves. I was really fortunate to have really strong mentors, but also not everyone looked like me. So a part of my journey, stepping into this role now for the next generation, is making sure that young women of color are able to see themselves in this field. And the last thing I would say is embrace winding paths. Sometimes you hit roadblocks. I graduated during COVID times where jobs were scarce. Even now, a lot of federal opportunities are shrinking. Some roads can feel closed, but I will say that a roadblock doesn't mean that the journey is over. It means you take a different route, right? Explore so many of the wonderful journeys that you've seen today. And those alternate paths, they're the ones that lead you to places you never imagined. But with that, thank you so much for being here today. I hope something in my story sparked an idea or make you think differently about your own path. Because again, and as I think Oscar said this already, but the world really needs your voice. And this work, we can't just do it alone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arson. Really appreciate all you had to share, both of you. Now we're going to transition into the Q&A session. So folks, feel free to drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A box. We already have a couple that have come in, so I'll just dive right in. And this is for either of you or both of you. A question comes from Amy. What knowledge and or skill did you find surprising or unexpected that ended up being important that you weren't taught in undergrad or grad school?
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think for me, a lot of my coursework in college focused on the importance of research and writing. But I think that something that I didn't really appreciate until I graduated was also the importance of communicating that work. And I think that, you know, the research is important, but if you're not doing a good job of getting it out there and ensuring that people are aware of the findings and especially also making the work understandable for those who might not have the technical background, then oftentimes it might be lost. But also, it means in general, you know, finding a way to communicate to people what why there is an urgency to climate action. And so I think for me, I've had some opportunities to better refine that, but it was something that maybe I wasn't top of mind when I had been in college or had first graduated.
And I will just add to that. For me, my holy grail has been collaboration. I know those who work at NWF see that as like one of our guiding values, but I mentioned this during my talk, but these are such big issues and it requires partnerships and support from so many different sectors and people across the aisle and bipartisan support. So really, the more you learn to work collaboratively, the more you learn to reach consensus and meet people halfway. Um, really helps put climate change as a top priority for a lot of these stakeholders and build those partnerships and allies that you need in this journey.
Great answers. Another question we had come in is, what advice do you have for those who identify as BIPOC or women of color?
I'm happy to take a stab at it. For me, I'd say two things that have helped me a lot is having strong, good mentors. I think it's important to have people around where you feel seen and heard. And it's not always easy to find mentors who look like you or share the same background or cultural experiences like you. And that's okay. Maybe that's a lesson for you to open that door a little bit more. But having that strong mentorship and peer network really helps. The other thing is representation. So show up at places, um, invite people to the table. For me, every time I hold a community workshop, I make sure that the voices that are least represented are coming to the table, and not just coming and sitting, but having an active voice there. Making sure that we are always thinking when we're thinking about problems, we're thinking who this problem impacts, where it impacts the most. And then the same with solutions on where are these solutions coming from? Who are they benefiting? So ensuring that you are representing yourself well in the field and then always helping represent the groups that might otherwise not be represented in these spaces. I'll stop here. Oscar, if you want to add anything.
Certainly, I agree with everything you said. The one thing I'll add is, please never rule yourself out. I think it could be so easy to tell yourself that an opportunity isn't for you, or you're not qualified enough, or you've never seen someone in a role that looks like you, and so maybe it's not for you. But I'm here hopefully to tell you that that's not the case. You belong in the spaces that you're in, and you're more than qualified for the things you aspire for. I've seen that in my own life firsthand, where I didn't mention this earlier, but as youth observer, I was the first Mexican American, Honduran American in the role. But there was a time when there were a number of roles that I might have passed up or not applied for because I just did not believe that that was for me or meant for me or meant for somebody like me. And so I'd encourage you to keep in mind that you absolutely belong in the spaces you want to be in.
Awesome. The next question is from Maria. Ask, for someone in undergrad wanting to go from emergency management to coastal resilience, what skills should I focus on?
I can talk a little about that. From the technical skills perspective, I'd say getting some basic understanding of climate science, coastal systems, coastal ecology. GIS mapping is a great skill set to get because a lot of like coastal issues, it's so easy to digest and understand if you have that spatial awareness. And we have great data sets that exist. So getting even like some basic learning of spatial mapping could be really helpful. And then from, again, the people systems perspective, tools on stakeholder engagement, community engagement, working through like partnerships and collaborations, and having that systems lens, because coastal space is a space where human, wildlife, nature interact very closely in one system. So making sure you understand how like one system affects the other could be really helpful. And the last thing I would say is NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, has great tools for coastal systems. They have trainings for coastal climate adaptation and solutions. So I think they have a great self-paced course on natural infrastructure for coastal systems. So I would really highly recommend looking into those tools and resources.
Great, thank you. And this next question is for you, Arslan. Do you feel like your PhD background helped you in your career path? With the job market looking the way it is, and this is more so a career switch for me, I'm thinking about going back for my PhD. I'm just wondering, as someone who currently holds 2 masters, if this is an avenue worth exploring, or should I be focusing more on my network, skills, finding mentors?
That's a great question. Um, let's see. So I love studying and education, and I've always had a really curious mind. So PhD for me was a really logical next step after my master's. Like I wanted to learn more and research more on climate impacts and apply this whole like science policy lens that I've been thinking about. Um, so it seemed like a logical next step at the point of career I was in. Having said that, I feel when we start PhD, or a lot of folks outside from the outset would think about PhD as this research project, and it's so much more than that. I think you acquire so many skills. You learn to be persistent. You learn to look at a problem with like 100 different lenses. You learn to be collaborative. You got to work with an advisor and manage this whole project team of faculty and project staff. You learn to do field trips and collect data, and of course, all those like technical hands-on data analysis skills. So I feel for me, I was really fortunate that I got a job that helped me apply a lot of those skills to real world community impact. And if you see that's the path for you, good luck, go for it. But also it's at the end, it's just a degree. Um, so keep focusing on all those other things, on network building, skill sets, and finding mentors. And if PhD feels like the right fit, go for it. But if there are other better opportunities, why not?
Thank you. The next question comes from Allison, and I think would be applicable to either of you. How have you adjusted your communication and outreach techniques as the media and technology world constantly evolves? And do you ever run into any barriers?
I think the biggest thing in the immediate sense is certainly there's been some evolution in how we communicate or reach out to people. Obviously, with the rise of short form video, that's become a really necessary tool for getting out any information around climate research or any events and what they mean more broadly for climate action. But I think as well, something that I've seen a bit through my work is that I've seen a lot of young people who are eager to maybe move a bit away from the online space into more back to more like in-person type meetings or events. And so that's been a really surprising tool as again, as I think people maybe get a bit burned out of just being online. And so that, again, has been a really sort of surprising development. And as far as barriers, I think one of the major barriers that most people in the climate space might face is that with the rise of disinformation and misinformation online, it's become increasingly difficult to reach certain people who might uh, be seeing some of this information around climate. And so what I've seen that oftentimes could be effective in those situations is that, you might uh, confront somebody who would say I'm not an environmentalist, or climate change is not one of my big issues of importance. But there's a way that you could find a framing of the topic to where you could sort of find that common ground with them. So in my case, right, when it came to my work in the coalition, some people might say, I extreme heat's not that important to me. That's something I don't really want to talk about. But if you talk to them about, well, are when you hear that our water source is in danger of drying up, does that worry you? That does. And it now becomes not just an environmental issue, it becomes a water access issue. And that is sort of the inroad you could find with those people that might otherwise completely shut themselves off from an environmental conversation. So it's finding those opportunities to create the best opportunity to reach out to those folks.
I agree to all of that. I think storytelling is so powerful, and telling stories that can resonate with people rather than this abstract idea of climate change. You're always going to reach out to more people, and always pair that information with solutions if you can, because you don't want to create a sense of fear, and you want to give communities and people some agency, and they do have a lot of agency. So you want to make sure you leave the conversations with that information on solution piece as well.
Thank you so much. Right, another question. Climate change and climate resilience are such big, complex issues. And it was mentioned that all jobs are climate jobs. How do you recommend finding your own niche or direction to focus on?
I think it starts with reflecting on one, the things that really interest you, and two, the skills you have and the things you're good at, and finding also, well, one, what you're interested in, the skills you have, and also what need there is out there in the world, and finding the role that allows for all those three things to intersect.
I love that question. That's something I've struggled so much because for the longest time, I wanted to do something on climate change, but didn't know what. Um, but what really helped me was taking a lot of classes and exploring a lot of different interests, whether it's coastal sciences or it's riverine flooding, like trying to understand a lot of those issues and the problems and the solutions that it takes. And the more you sort of delve deeper into it, the more clear your paths become. And I think that's the only way to get there.
Great. I know you both have already given a lot of really great advice and did a really lovely job kind of outlining your career journeys. But looking back, is there anything you wish you had done differently when starting out that you might give as a piece of advice to someone else who is just starting their career journey?
I wish I was more interested and active in career panels like the Eco School program. I think these kind of opportunities, making sure you're investing your time and energy into it is so powerful. And it gets you a step closer to sort of fine tuning what you want to do and how does for instance, when I was thinking about a day in my journey or a day in my work life, it was really interesting. I never get to learn that kind of information. I wish I did. Um, so I think pursuing these opportunities as much as you can, meeting folks as early as you can, start networking, like reach out to people, ask what their day looks like, and start building those networks early. I think I waited till like I finished my education and was in a space to do that. But you don't have to. Right after high school or in your undergrad, start reaching out to people and learn their journeys. And the more you do that, the more that's going to help fine tune your own journey.
The one thing I'd add to that is don't be afraid to ask for help. I think it's really easy to um, pull back for asking for someone to talk to you about their role if it interests you, or to support you in editing your resume because it might quote unquote feel like you're being a burden. But that's absolutely not the case. I can guarantee you that most people are going to be eager to work with you, especially as students or as early professionals. And it's difficult to go out these things alone. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Great advice. All right, we are getting close to the end of time. I think we have time for one more kind of related question. And also any final thoughts or pieces of advice you'd like to share, but are there specific courses, certifications, or training programs that you would recommend that we could share with the audience?
I can mention a few that I've come across. I mentioned the NOAA trainings. They're self-paced and really good space to enter into that coastal resilience field. Yale program on climate communication. Don't exactly quote me on that, but Yale University, they have some really good programs on climate communications, and I think that is a really strong skill set in this day and age, because as we've talked about this earlier, you got to learn how to like reach different folks and how to package that messaging to make sure you're having the most impact. GIS courses, whatever you can find in terms of basic ArcGIS Pro trainings, those are always handy. Um, what else? I'll add in the chat if I can think of anything else.
I think for those that are interested specifically in engaging at the UN, the role that I had of the UNA USA Youth Observer to the UN opens up every year. And I highly encourage anybody who's interested in applying. The United Nations Foundation has what's called the Our Future Agenda Fellowship, the Next Generation Fellowship, that gives young people a platform to help inform UN policy. And at the UN itself, every 2 years, they select a new group of, and I forget the specific name, but it's essentially like young climate advisors to the Secretary General. And that gives you the opportunity to go directly to work directly with the Secretary General, the head of the UN and their team to inform climate policy.
Awesome. Great.
Can I add one more thing there? Because
Of
I
course.
feel we didn't talk about it. But also make sure you're looking into professional associations in your field of interest. So if you're more into planning, think about American Planning Association. For climate adaptation, we have ASAP, which is American Society of Adaptation Professionals. And then we have a bunch other AGU, American Geophysical Union. So make sure you're connected with those professional organizations. That's always a good place to learn about all these new trainings that are upcoming or new job opportunities, and just a great place to network as well.
Great advice. All right, and with that, I think we have come to time. Thank you so much to our incredible panelists and all of our attendees for joining us today for this discussion and over the 2 days of programming. Really appreciate all of your time, and I know I gained a lot from it as well, so thank you all. I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, David Corsar, to wrap us up.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you, Arsum and Oscar, for a fantastic panel to finish off our EcoCareers Summit series this year. As has been mentioned in the chat in the lobby, all of the recordings are available as soon as Zoom makes them available. So you actually can go back into the lobby and view Tuesday's sessions already. But we'll also be following up with everyone that's registered for the summit with the recordings, as well as any supplemental information. Some of the speakers have already kind of followed up with their slides and with other things that they wanted to pass along. The lobby itself will stay open for another 3 weeks, I believe. So feel free to go back there, check out the resources. I'll put in one more plug for our career planning workbook that takes you through the process of self-reflection, career exploration, evaluating career criteria and different alternative pathways. So definitely check that out. That's pinned in the lobby. And please reach out. Our contact information will be available also in the lobby. We'll be reaching out via email with the emails that you registered for. And we encourage you to stay connected to the National Wildlife Federation and our youth leadership and career preparation programming. So once again, thank you all for participating. And we look forward to being there alongside your journeys.